Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Groundhog Day. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by the Tip Top Cafe. It's that time of year again, so before hearing the good news from Punxsutawney Phil, come stuff your face with coffee and pastries at the Tip Top Cafe. How's it going? I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And this is The Pestle, where we analyze films and look for, ways to get better as filmmakers and storytellers and movie enthusiasts. I try to watch like a new movie a day, which I don't succeed, nearly as often. So I'm not like watching 365 new movies a year, but I try. I might, do at least between 4 to 6 movies a week.
I mean, that's impressive, dude.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit like having to wean yourself off of fast food. Like, oh, I've been eating a lot of Taco Bell, and hey, Taco Bell's delicious. But once you have too much of that, right, it's hard to appreciate, your asparagus and roasted carrots. Like, they just lose. And so having to sit down and watch movies is a really great way. It's almost like reading a book. It requires just a lot more attention and recall and patience. And I love that, forcing myself to instill those kind of values in me. Do you watch a lot of the news stuff?
Leading question. Normally, yes, but lately I've been pretty, I wouldn't call myself busy, just involved in a lot where I don't have the time. You are a family man. If it's late at night after if I've just put the kids to sleep and maybe I'm doing so right now I'm building a studio in my backyard and that's taking up all my time, and then at night I'm researching what the heck I'm going to do tomorrow on it because I don't know what I'm doing, and so it's just taking up all my time, so I haven't been able to watch anything leading up to the start of building this and then building it this whole week and everything. But I usually try to watch new things, but I like to be referred to things, rather than just, oh, that looks good, watch it. Because then I start relying too much on Netflix, and I don't want to be fed.
It becomes inefficient
stuff.
It becomes a very inefficient.
Yeah,
way of
and
discovery.
inefficient. Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, because there are scenarios where there are films that I'll watch that we're gonna cover, where at the beginning I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch this. Like this, I'm not gonna like this. And then maybe by the end, I'm glad I watched it. It was good. But I don't have the patience for that unless somebody has told me, hey, dude, you should watch this. It's just like a vote of confidence that I can give an hour and a half or 2 hours to this thing, rather than just taking a chance. And sometimes I do, but lately I just, my time has been very precious to me. So I have been protective of it, I guess, which is good and bad.
Yeah, for sure. I remember a while back, I think we all have this habit of adding things to our Netflix list, our queue. And a while back, they used to tell you how many things were in your list. Like they gave you a number. They don't do that anymore. But at the time, I was like, man, I'm up to 200 movies and TV shows. I need to whittle this down. I need to stop adding things. And I spent the next 2 or 3 months literally watching everything in there that I hadn't seen before, and it was mildly satisfying. The little neurotic person that lives inside me, but also I learned a lot of things that should not have been on my list. It's just part of the fun. I will say, so this is airing the week after the election. I will just want to, congratulate or give condolences to everyone, for the victory and or loss of your favorite or hated candidate. And so and so this is like still mid-October. This is October 16th. We're recording this. Man, a couple days ago, I got Hannah sent me a postcard that she handmade effectively. Yeah, Hannah did. She sent me this amazing, beautiful painting. She had asked me like, "Hey, what's your favorite?" She had put out a call on her Insta and was like, "Hey, if anybody wants a postcard, let me know and I'll send you one." And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love one." I just assumed that she was gonna like print out like 100 postcards of whatever her favorite picture was or something. But after I said, "Yeah, send me one," and she came back and was like, "Yeah, what do you love? What do you love in nature?" And I was like, I love water, I love mist, and fog or whatever. And and she painted like, I think in watercolor, like she painted a custom like postcard, and it's gorgeous. And this is the point that I'm driving to. First of all, obviously, I thanked her, and it was just absolutely, melting. But on the back, she like wrote a poem, and I'm pretty sure it was an original poem. I've never read this before. Not that I have a mental, complete memory of every poem ever written, but I have been writing, Todd, poetry since, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years old. Like I've been, for most of my life. And I have never written a poem as good as the one she wrote. And it was just one of those things where you're like, damn, some people really just got it. And so I don't know about you, but I'm like really impressed. And yeah, like, damn, we got some talented peeps in our audience is all I'm saying.
So yeah, Hannah, you're amazing. Can you read it to me at some point? It doesn't have to be on air.
I will. Okay.
No, it's just for you.
Sure. Okay. I will share it only with you. Otherwise, it's really just for me. But I will post the.
I totally get it.
I'll post the picture in the show notes though, and tag her so that I believe she's a photographer, and her Insta is filled with amazing photography. So I'll link that, and a big thank you. But yes, I will read you the poem after.
That's amazing.
After we finish and we wrap. Because,
sweet.
You'll be the only other person.
Me.
You'll be the third.
Wow. Well, you don't have to. You can.
I
keep
will.
It for yourself,
I'll be happy to.
I'm just
so
intrigued.
That at least one other
love
person
hearing poetry.
Can witness just how absolutely fantastic her writing is.
I love her new haircut.
Dude, doesn't it look? Oh, it looks so good.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's amazing. Yeah, she's crushing it.
Yeah.
Nice. So, what are we going to cover today, man?
Today, we're going to do a film that probably most people haven't heard of, but they should. It's called Primer. So, if you haven't seen this movie, pause the episode and go watch it. Where can they get it? Is it on?
It was on Netflix for a while. I don't know if it is right now, but it usually pops up. It's one of these little indie darlings that gets a lot of love and will occasionally pop up. Yeah, I'm checking. I don't know if you're already on it, but I'm checking justwatch.com. And you can rent it at a bunch of places for, $3. Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, all the usual suspects. And of course, Apple TV charges $4 because it's Apple, and
Apple.
They do.
Oh God! You hear what they're doing with the new phone?
No, what are they doing?
Oh, to save on shipping, right? They're going to include a cable, but not the plug.
So just a USB port.
Just the USB cable, and it's a Thunderbolt to USB 3.
You know what else? Since we're talking about really annoying big tech companies, I've just bought and I just got in the mail. I haven't even opened it yet. The new Oculus Quest 2, and apparently you have to log in through your Facebook account. Like you can't just put it on and use it like any other hardware. You have to literally tie it to and. I really hate that kind of stuff. Passionately. If I'd really understood that before I ordered it, I would not have ordered it because I just feel like the man is going to be tracking me. I don't know. I'm not like this tinfoil hat kind of person, but that stuff is just really, really annoying. I like privacy and generally for a company. Like I don't even run searches on my Google Chrome. Like I run all my searches in incognito. oh, hey, here's a barbecue recipe that I want to look up incognito. I'm looking that up because I don't like them building, and I'm sure they're still collecting that data, but it's not supposed to be directly tied to my account. And so I don't know. That's my high level of annoyances. Don't get me started on the TSA. Like, anyway.
Yeah. Oh man, I know. I've flown with you before. Ooh, doggy.
So yeah, we're gonna cover primer, and along the way we'll talk about a bunch of things for sure. Cinematography, specifically shooting ratios. We'll talk about audio, how to sell a location. We'll discuss some of the story and writing, advancing the story off screen. But I think the biggest takeaway is going to be a discussion on low budget filmmaking and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a synopsis of the film. Remember, there's going to be spoilers, so please watch this if you haven't seen it. 4 friends, fledgling entrepreneurs, knowing that there's something bigger and more innovative than the different error-checking devices they've built, wrestle over their new invention. Written and directed by Shane Carruth, screenplay by Matthew Michael Carnahan, Drew Goddard, and Damon Lindelof, starring Shane Carruth as Aaron, David Sullivan as Abe, Samantha Thomson as Rachel, and Carrie Crawford as Kara.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to read this, and you're going to listen. And you're going to stay on the line, and you're not going to interrupt. You're not going to speak for any reason. Some of this you know, but I'm going to start at the top of the page. Meticulous. Yes. Methodical. Educated. They were these things. Nothing extreme, like anyone they varied. There were days of mistakes, and laziness, and infighting. And there were days, good days, when by anyone's judgment, they would have to be considered clever. No one would say that what they were doing was complicated. It wouldn't even be considered new, except for maybe in the geological sense. They took from their surroundings what was needed and made of it something more.
So, I could have picked a much better clip, but I'm apparently falling on the job. So that is just as good as anything, because I think I don't know, I have so many thoughts.
What are you gonna pull? I mean, really?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, everything's going to feel out of context and without enough information to a large degree. Yeah, so I think you've seen it twice now. That's
yeah, seen it twice.
Yeah, so I think there is a benefit. I know you wanted to watch it another time before we recorded this episode, but I think there is some benefit for the audience who may only watch it once, and having your perspective align with theirs might be of some use. So what is that? What's your takeaway? How do you feel after finishing this thing?
So anytime that someone tells you they don't understand a film, or like they don't get it, that always, for me, that's like a challenge. It's like, really? Okay, I got this, right? And I still don't got it. You know, I knew going in that I didn't really get everything the first time that I saw it, and I paid very close attention, and I still there's so many loopholes and talking about, you know, times to get in the box and times to get out, and then they don't give you too much exposition on what exactly happens. There's so many holes on purpose, and they leave that to you to figure it out. It's when you're talking about time travel movies, that is the way to do it. You don't spoon feed people. This movie will stick with you because you're trying to, you want to understand it, right? And the other cool thing is that it's not 2.5 hours long. So it's an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes. And so it's not exhausting. You know, you get in, there's a build up, and then you're like, what, you know, a mind twist, and then it drags you along, and you're just like, what? And then it's over. And you're kind of left thinking, what the hell happened? Or how did that all happen? I need to go watch this again to try to see if I really understand it. And then you'll watch it again and you might understand a little bit more, but you probably won't get it all. I love that kind of movie. I love it. This one in particular is really great because it's an indie film where you had some guys who just made it, right? They had this idea and they just made the movie. And to know that it just is mind blowing that this movie was like, what was the budget?
Oh, like less than $7,000.
Less than $7,000?
Yeah.
$7,000.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, they had to call in a million favors.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously none of the actors are getting paid.
Yeah.
And
but anyway, I thought the acting was really good. I thought the writing was brilliant because of its simplicity. I thought the props were brilliant because of their simplicity. Let me talk about the cinematography for a second, because there is a big difference between, how do I put this? I still cannot tell you, I've worked with Alexa cameras. I've worked with Red cameras. I've worked with Canon cameras. I've worked with, a lot of different cameras, as you have. And I cannot tell you how to get the feeling of a shot that they get in like Joker, right? Or in, like in let's call Joker a medium budget film because they spent like $50 million on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so to get a shot like that has that kind of feel and emotion in it, I cannot tell you how to get that. Now, I know they used like really nice cameras, but here's the thing. That's why I'm comparing, that movie to this movie. They probably, I don't know what they used. Do you know what they used?
Super 16 film. Yeah.
Okay.
This was released in 2004, just for reference.
Right. There is just something it's beyond the camera that a good cinematographer can capture that translates to the feeling of an actual movie. That's the best way I can say it. You have TV, which doesn't translate to the feeling of a movie. You have most indie films, 99% of indie films, don't translate to the feeling of a movie. And then you have actual movies that you go and see in the theater. And sometimes those don't always translate to the feeling of a movie, but a lot of times they do, So how could they pull off the feeling of I'm watching a movie, right? Like, kind of that same level, of emotion. I'm not talking about quality even.
Mm-hmm.
That's the weird thing. I don't even know how I'm phrasing this question to you. It's just, and I've always felt this. I've always felt like, how is that accomplished to get that? And I think it dawned on me with this film, watching this film again, that it's not just about the camera and it's not just about the person behind it. It's about all of it. I could use a 5D and go out and film something, and if I get the right angle of the right person or thing doing the right thing, tied together with all the rest of the things, that's the other part of it. It's like, it can't just be like, here's a good looking scene and here's a crappy looking scene, like all together. And then you have this feeling of this is a movie. And that's what I think they did so well in this film. Yeah, these are actors that you don't know. So you have to they have to pull you in so that you relate to them, right? So they have to be good actors. The dialogue has to be good and pointed and important. There can't be any fluff. And the story itself has to be enticing to draw you in. And they do all of that. It's really unbelievable I think the Super 16 helps because it gives it that kind of raw feel, which it has the whole time. I mean, I didn't know they shot it at Super 16, but I totally can see that now. Yeah. But like certain angles, like when they go into the U-Haul and they're, you know, gonna open the front gate or whatever, to their unit, you know, like the low shot of the bottom of it, and then the hand like pulls it up. Like those are the kinds of little things. You get this one little second of that, or one little second of that, and you can use all of it to tie everything together. It's like you're constantly establishing where you are in the world, right? And they do that so well. Who shot this? Who did we say shot this?
Well, that's the hilarious thing. I mean, this was such a low budget thing. They didn't have. If you actually look at the credits, you'll see that Shane Carruth is effectively everything. But even some of the actors are listed as camera operators. Like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it reminds me of us making Off of Zombies, but obviously times a million.
Yeah.
And where, you know, sometimes you and I are both in the shot, and so we can't operate. And it's like,
you just put it on his sticks.
Yeah. Well, you hand it to someone else. You're like, hey, can you just do this? Like, I'm going to show you the move, and now you do the move. And he would. And what's outrageous about this film, and I think one of the many reasons why it's this, you know, it's a Hollywood darling of a film. Like, it was made for $7,000. And the reason I even knew about this film was I was watching the Independent Spirit Awards that I believe air the night before the Oscars. And it's basically a big tent, you know, more or less, that takes place, you know, in the downtown LA somewhere, I guess. And it's changed a lot, I'm sure, over, you know, since, you know, 2005, whenever that was hosted. But effectively, this was just kind of up for one of the best pictures because of the fact that it was made for so little money. This, you know, it's very much El Mariachi and some other films like that people made for, you know, nickels. And then the other part that's just absolutely ridiculous is the shooting ratio on this thing. And if you don't know what a shooting ratio is, imagine you're going to make a 10-minute film and you shoot 100 minutes worth of footage. Now you have a shooting ratio of 1 to 10, right? Because you used 10% of your footage for the final edit. And a 10 to 1 ratio is pretty normal, I would say, in a lot of films. You know, if you're shooting maybe a lot of whatever, slow-mo or a lot of coverage, maybe multiple cameras, 20 to 1 isn't out of the question. This film, and I'm just trying to give you a frame of reference, documentary, depending on your style, could be 100 to 1. Like
100 to 1, yeah.
It's just absolutely insane when you think about all the B-roll and the long interviews that don't make it into the final, et cetera, et cetera. And so this film had a shooting ratio that was effectively 1 to 1.
What?
He shot, I want to say he shot like 79 minutes worth of footage, and this is a 77-minute film.
So like literally everything is one take.
Yeah. He would rehearse, and I know a stupid amount about this film, not everything, but a lot. And he would effectively just rehearse, 40, 50 times until he liked everyone's performance. And then he would capture that angle. And then, move the camera to the next angle, rehearse. Because one of the big things that he was going after was this feeling of inventors in the garage, Steve Jobs and Wozniak in the garage creating something. And he wanted, to kind of capture that feel. And that's why the dialogue is so low tone and fast and shop talk, right? We don't always understand what they're saying. But like you said, we understand their significance there and that they're saying something important. And they usually reiterate or hammer something just enough that, you understand a little bit. You have some context of what's happening, just enough to kind of keep up with the next story point. And so a lot of that, he wanted to make sure, and he said that the only reason that he cast himself in this film was he couldn't find an actor that would not chew on the lines like an actor. Like, this isn't Macbeth. You're not supposed to, spew it forth. You're supposed to throw it away. This is all engineers talking to each other. Not everything's significant. It's not like, oh my God, this thing, it's proteins, molecules building up. No, it's just engineers talk to each other in this very specific way where they're constantly making sure they're following each other, right? It's a very laborious process of making sure the clarity is there in your communication with one another. And he wanted to capture that kind of fast and also specific tone. And obviously he absolutely nailed that. I don't know if he was an engineer himself. I've heard that before. I haven't ever actually verified it, to be honest. And so whenever you're shooting like that, though, when you're shooting for a 1-to-1 ratio, it also means, and I think this will, add on to, your thoughts and your point that you're making about why this feels like a film, even though it was made for nothing. And that's because he thought through every single shot. He knew exactly what the scene was going to look like before he shot it. Now, I think that also came with some penalties. There were certain things that, looking back, I would be highly surprised if he said, man, I really would have liked an extra 5 seconds on that shot. There's scenes where you can see him say cut, even though they cut the audio out. But if you know what you're looking for, you'll actually see him say cut on screen because he needed a little bit more tail in that shot. And that's a film term, by the way, folks. If you're looking at a clip and you might say to your editor, can we get a little more head or can we get a little more tail on that shot? And they're just saying extend the beginning or extend the end of that shot. That's head and tail. And so there's shots where you can see him say cut and you're just like, yeah, I know he would have loved to.
I need to go back and look. What shots were that? I need to go back and look.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I would have to. It's one of the shots in the garage. It's one of the shots in the garage where he's sitting on camera thinking, and it's just very subtle. You can just see his mouth move. Cut. And so,
wow.
But there's a lot of those kind of moments where I'm like, yeah, an extra 10 seconds on that shot would have helped you dip to black to help create the transition or passage of time a little bit smoother. Because there's one shot in there that, and here's the fun thing I think about this movie is because of how meticulously put together it is, given the constraints of budget, which to some degree is, like I'm saying, like a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Like an extra grand could have made this a little bit better of a film. But it also, it speaks to the spirit of filmmaking. And I think that's why, it's so well beloved, because it is an excellently laid out story that you have to work for. And it's 90% there. There's that extra 10% that I'm like, man, an extra 10 or 15 minutes of this thing. You can flesh out certain story points like the gunman in the party could have used a little extra detail or setup before that payoff. And it just gives you this feeling of, oh, I missed it. I didn't quite understand where this moment came from. And it still works. I don't think it's anything that he should hang his head on. But I think it's the kind of thing where he could have and maybe should have remade this movie with a budget. Like this movie with $5 million suddenly becomes an hour and 40-minute film that really knocks your socks off, or even a sequel. I think this would be a great sequel because it ends on a really interesting note, and he could follow this up at any point and make a sequel that follows the I don't want to call him the clone, but one of the original errands that's now going and setting up a whole new fucking shop with time boxes that extend every meter on the meter. Like it's such a good so I'm sorry, I'm like chasing my tail all over the place here.
Yeah.
And so there's a shot though that I think hurts the story a little bit when early on, whenever they're still kind of figuring out what the box is trying to do before they understand that it's creating a loop that is traveling on. They open the box and then we just cut to black, and then we see him wake up on the floor, and you're just like, what? Did they get knocked out? Like the way it's cut, the way it's edited makes it feel like there was something very, very screwed up that happened with the machine. There was a bad interaction with the machine. And I think that was just bad storytelling. I think my impression is he's waking up on the floor because he's just tired from working all the time. He doesn't even know what time of day it is, right? But the edit there creates a different impression. The edit creates an impression that he lost time itself because of the machine, not because
that's not what happened.
No, that's not. And that's and so I think an extra 5 or 10 seconds on that last shot, you can dissolve, and then probably don't have the guy waking up on his floor without commenting on why he's waking up on the floor. It just creates a little extra confusion that isn't real. I mean, you could argue that it's servicing the story, I guess, if your goal is maximum awareness from the viewer, because now we're like, wait, what just happened? You're definitely making me sit up and pay attention more, but there's no real payoff from that moment, I guess. And so throughout the film, there's all kinds of those things that pop up. There's a lot of, you can tell he's not on the one hand, he does some really, really amazing cinematography when you consider he's not a filmmaker who made this. Of course, you run a marathon, you're a marathoner. It doesn't matter if you came in last. If you made a film, he's a filmmaker. I'm not by his standards. Like, I've never made a movie, so I am absolutely in awe of everything about this movie. But it also is one of those things where you're looking at it and you're like, man, there's color issues all over the place. Like, right. All over the place. Just color issues. There's, focus issues. And I don't think the focus issues hurt that much when they do pop up. I think it adds a little bit to the disorientation. And so I think it plays well enough into the story that it doesn't hurt anything. There's portholing, not just vignetting. And there's a difference. So sometimes if the lens that is on your camera isn't big enough to fit entirely over the sensor that's capturing the image, if the lens isn't big enough to cover the sensor, then you might get what's called vignetting. That's kind of the corners of the sensor being covered up a little bit by the lens. And so a light vignette is just kind of a grade, right? I think generally we're familiar with vignettes on a picture, right? You just kind of lightly,
the corners are blacked out,
grayed out,
just a little bit,
just a little bit. Portholing is when a really good chunk of the sensor is actually blocked off. Like, it's not just picking up a little shadow from the lens. It's being blocked entirely. And that's where you have hard black on the corners. And there's, I don't know, 10 shots like that are on there. And that's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me, to be completely frank. I think it adds a little bit to the darling aspect of this movie. As a filmmaker watching it, I would add, and I don't think the audience is hurting at all from it, just because you're so busy trying to focus and understand what's happening on screen. You're not losing anything.
I missed all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
I missed all that.
You're just so dialed in. And that's awesome. In terms of low budget filmmaking, he does so many smart things. There's this beautiful visual effects shot that he inserts here. And the other part of this that is why it's so beloved is because for $7,000, he made a pretty high concept sci-fi film. Sci-fis are absolutely destroyed in budget. You can't do that. You can't make a sci-fi film for pennies, for peanuts. That doesn't happen. And he did that, and he did just enough to sell it, right? Like you said, the set design with those boxes, nothing. It costs absolutely nothing, but it adds to this idea, and it's perfect because the story is very much benefiting production, because he made a story about broke engineers inventing something. They have no money for nice things, and so you don't need to go and rent or buy or cajole your way into nice things. It's okay to go grab a carburetor out of a car parts yard, a junkyard, and then now that's a prop. Now it looks like they're stealing a carburetor off a car. It works, and you imply all these things, right? They imply that they're taking copper tubing off the fridge. We never see that happening, but in our mind it did. Like, suddenly it's playing. The story he wrote played perfectly into his production needs, which were I need maximum for nothing. Just like an engineer. So yeah, it's genius. And he never needed all these really luxurious set designs. I mean, he needed what, PVC pipe and wires spitting out everywhere. Cool. That's, $10 to build a box. Genius.
So awesome.
But the visual effects shot that I really loved, that it just kind of gets swallowed up in the story, is whenever they're first at the very beginning, probably 10 minutes in, they're testing that little device, and he goes and grabs a hole puncher, empties all the paper holes out of it, and he floats them on top of the device, and they kind of suspend in the air. Well, this is so smart. So he shot it once with his camcorder, and then he pulled his camcorder into After Effects, which this was an early edition, I'm sure, of After Effects or whatever visual effects program. I think it was After Effects. And created the shot. Like, okay, I just need to create a bunch of little white circles floating, and I'll add, some opacity or whatever, or remove some opacity and whatever. And then he uploaded that clip, the visual effects clip, back into the camcorder, and then played it back while he recorded everything and did a rack focus on Super 16. So now we're going to redo this shot again, except now for film. And we're going to dolly over as we're watching this guy carry these things. And in the background, out of focus, he's just empty-handed, right? Just dropping nothing. But now we're racking focus to the LCD screen that's playing back the visual effects shot. And so he's able to capture in camera this freaking visual effects shot. It's freaking genius. Holy
That's amazing.
crap.
That just blew my mind. Really? Wow, how smart.
And now it all looks like it's happening like in real time.
Yeah.
God, I mean, the
I
level
forgot
of
about that
thought is absolutely incredible. So we could do the same thing, right? We could go shoot a scene on a 5D, like you were saying, and then whatever, pull it in After Effects, do something really amazing, and then upload it back into the 5D, play it back in the LCD, and now it looks like we're watching someone fly or disappear or whatever. Like you can suddenly in camera pull off a shot that is otherwise much more expensive. And it just adds a layer of quality.
And the coolest thing about that is that you can get away with the special effects not being highbrow.
Yeah.
Like they can be a little bit bad because you're looking at it from a camera on a camcorder in a tiny little screen that has like blue color everywhere, that has like no saturation at all. So really you could get away with a lot more.
That's such a good point.
Just brilliant.
So freaking smart.
Oh my God.
I'll jump around a little bit more. The audio, I actually really love the audio in this. It's simple stuff. It's just basic filmmaking 101. Like a lot of ambient noise, right? If we're going into an office, it's probably like an office that he actually worked at the time, or a buddy's office. And they's like, hey, for, an hour, can we borrow this corner room? Cool. And
yeah,
roll audio. I'm sure he captured, wild sounds, or maybe they filmed on a Saturday or something. But okay, we're in an office, so we're going to have low ambient noise, maybe some paperwork, but more than anything, there's a phone ringing in the background. Like, and now it's an office. Suddenly, there you are. It's an office.
Yeah.
We're in a science lab. Let's really pump in the cooling system, which maybe he didn't even have to pump that in. I'm sure that came for free, but he used it, and it sold the location. Yeah. And this whole film is pretty dirty, and he played into that. This whole idea of broke engineers fit very well into the kind of low quality of some of the production design and some of the even the audio. Like, let's make everything a little bit worse, and intentional or not, like it didn't hurt the film because of the story that he was telling. It all felt normal. It felt natural in that environment, and that we were kind of flies observing. And just to briefly jump back into what you were talking about earlier, every scene he had to absolutely like meticulously say, what shot is this going to be? Okay, we're going to be walking down the hall. Great. But at the same time, it wasn't ever just completely lazy. It wasn't like we're not going to try for interesting things. There was a smart shot where he does this circle dolly move as they're revealing him having a realization of something. He's having a moment, an epiphany. And he uses in the driveway when he's holding the basketball, we do this very nice circle dolly around him. And he said they probably rehearsed that 100 times, that move. But it was very targeted, very specific, and it coalesced very nicely with the writing and story revelation. So he's very highly aware of filmmaking ethos and the idea of capturing the story symbolically with camera movement. And nothing went to waste. And going into some of the story and writing stuff, he did a great job of advancing the story off screen. And so at first we're there at the beginning, right? And we see that they're having to work on this project that they're not really excited about. And then suddenly as people do, you get working on a project and you just get invested in it. And so even though this wasn't their idea, this is what's happening at the table at the beginning. They're sitting around with all these guys, and they're even kind of color coded. Like Abe and Aaron are both in white shirts, and the other guys are in like these blue shirts. And that's kind of the teams that we're looking at. We're looking at these two guys versus these two guys, but they're all kind of pulling their money together and experience, because they're all engineers in different ways, to let's make something viable and make money finally. And so they're working on this other guy's project that they're trying to talk him out of at the table. He's like, hey, if we're still playing by the rules, I want to do my idea. Cool. And so they're in it, they're in the garage, and they're trying to figure out some kind of cooling mechanism that's much more cost efficient. And they're just sitting there babbling about, all the mechanics of it. And they're even talking over the head of the guy whose idea it was in the first place. They're already talking over his head. And then that's when they have this realization. And so the movie is kind of them stealing an idea from someone else, on a very high level, because this was his idea to work on this project. Something else came out of it, but now they're cutting him out. They're like, yeah, he doesn't even know about that.
Yeah.
And that kind of speaks to, I don't know, that whole environment, I guess. Anyway, so after we kind of established that something weird is happening, they started progressing the story off screen. It's not when we're watching it. So instead of both characters and us discovering them discover something, instead one character makes an advancement and then shows the other character. So Aaron, the brown-headed guy, we'll just, Aaron is brown-headed and Abe is the red-headed guy. Aaron picks up Abe after, that weird blackout sequence, pulls him downstairs, and he's like, okay, we can get tacos on the way now, or I can show you, we can get steak afterwards. And he's like, oh, you figured it out. And so suddenly Aaron is showing Abe, yeah, here's how this thing is operating now. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. And then we kind of flash forward months. We don't know if that's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. They don't really say, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter. But sometime within the next couple months, Abe makes an advancement. And now he pulls Aaron in. And the interesting thing is, and this is going to be so loopy, I'm going to do my best. But the very first time that we're watching Abe introduce the time travel mechanic to Aaron, we're not actually seeing that scene as it originally happened. We're already watching, and you can tell based on if Aaron has got the earpiece in or not. And from that very first moment, we're already seeing a duplicate or a version of Aaron who's come back in time, because he's either recording it for the first time or he's replaying it for the second or third time. And so one way or another, this is a new version of this moment. We're seeing a time travel moment already happening. And this is for the astute, right? Like if you, whatever. And so we start going through and we see him catch Aaron up on, here's what's going on. Like I'm walking him laboriously through all the paces. And I love this because it's a show me, don't tell me rule that he's following. Like we don't want to hear Abe tell, hey, I've invented time travel. No, it kind of undersells the effect and we're going to lose the suspension of disbelief. Instead, we have to be shown just like Aaron. And so it's a great point of exposition for us, the audience, that's told through Aaron's eyes. And that's just another great storytelling effect. And it works so well here because they're engineers. He wants to walk them through the process. And the wrinkles that he adds in the story are what make it so genius. The whole aspergillus, whatever, Tiberius Kirk, I don't know what it's actually called, but it's like, yeah, there's a protein that builds up over time. And so he found just this really brilliant, simple, natural end on how to introduce the effects of time travel. Instead of saying we observed it, it's we felt the effects of time travel, which is something that you don't see in time travel films, right? It's always, I changed something and now I got to change it back. Those kinds of things, which work in their own elements. But here, this is the indie version of a time travel story. And he just freaking kills it. And so I think generally speaking, the story is trying to build on this idea that they took from their surroundings what was needed and made it something more. And so there's all kinds of things. I would say it's probably a little more useful to Google it. There's people who have literally drawn maps and loops because he doesn't give you everything. There's things that happen in this version of the story that the characters themselves don't know what happened. And so we have to start assuming how many times has he been through this loop? How many other loops have there been? And it gets into this whole idea of maybe there's parallel universes that they're creating effectively. Because if Aaron goes back in time and at the beginning of the story, they're accounting for that. They're creating very pure loops, right? They go turn on the machine, they go hang out in a hotel, they wait till the end of the day, then they get in the machine, and then they go back in time. Nothing is changed. There's no causality issues. They didn't change anything. That's a perfect loop. But what happens if you get in the time machine and then go back in time and knock yourself out and store yourself in the attic? And that version of you never gets into the time machine. Now you've created a whole parallel universe where there's now two of you in this one. And there's probably one of you missing somewhere out there.
Yeah.
And so that creates this whole mind-bending issue of time loops and causality issues. And at one point, all they know is the very first time they go to test the causality, right? The kids are on the street and they wake him up. And he's like, Abe has a bright idea. I want to test this experience. Because they kind of brought up this whole grandfather paradox issue with Aaron wants to punch his boss in the face and then go back in time and tell himself to not do it. What does that do? That's kind of the question that is asked. And they kind of say, once you put that question out there, you have to answer it. And the rest of this film is an attempt at trying to answer that or at least discuss it. And so they do. Well, they start to. This is where everything really goes off the rails. Because just as they plan to, Abe says, okay, we're going to test this. And I'm super paraphrasing because you don't want to hear that scene played back. It's just going to piss you off. But effectively what's happening in this scene is he goes and wakes up Aaron at 3 a.m. He's like, hey, I want to see what happens if I go back in time and prevent those kids from waking me up. And now that guy's going to get into the time machine on schedule and effectively we'll just see what happens. And as Aaron's like, yeah, okay, we'll test that out. Because if that works, then Aaron can go back in time and punch his boss in the face. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so they are on their way to U-Haul. And what do they see? They see Rachel's dad, Mr. Granger, their investor, is waiting outside in the car. And it's a version, and what they find out, because they're like, is that him? I don't know. I think he had more beard growth than what I saw on him earlier today. That can't be that same version of him. And so what do? They get on the phone. They call Mr. Granger up, who then answers the phone at home. And they're like, then who the hell is that guy? If that's not the Mr. Granger, then there's a loop of him that's gone back in time. And so they go, and one way or another, he goes into a coma. That's the part we don't know. Did Aaron knock him out? Did he trip and fall? Was there some time effect issue? We don't know. They don't even try to answer that question. But all they know is now they have a body of a doppelganger sitting in a coma upstairs in their bedroom. And this is when they start trying to hash out what happened. Well, I don't know. Something's obviously different. Something's obviously changed. And what you can, once you know the rest of the movie, you can start to surmise that at one point with the gunman storyline, the gunman probably went back in time, not went back in time, but one version of those happened where the gunman kills Rachel. And the father's obviously inconsolable, and probably at that point, Aaron shares with him, hey, I can fix this. At which point the dad goes back in time to try to fix it. And
I see.
Then Aaron goes back again at some point, and they lose the thread of where that guy got introduced in the first point.
That's interesting, because I was wondering, I was like, why did they want to stop this guy? Because he didn't hurt anybody. He just brought the gun. So why is he like so hell-bent on going back to stop this guy when he never hurts anybody anyway?
Yeah.
Like, what's the problem? So he must have, hurt Rachel.
You must have hurt Rachel.
Okay. And one thing I do like is that they identify causality in like a very interesting and understandable way with the cell phone. When he answers his wife's phone call, and she calls and he answers, and then Abe is like, well, wait a minute, your other version, if she called, would your other version would have answered it? He's like, maybe. What happens if there's the same number with two phones? Do they both ring? I don't know. I guess it's whatever's closer. Is that true? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the whole, it's very easy to understand. It's the whole like, oh no, I shouldn't have answered because my other real self that should be present should have answered. And if I answered instead, then did I change something? Is this did I create a new universe? Like, yeah.
Ooh.
And then, because there are 30 different other very difficult things to understand regarding causality in this movie, but at least they give you one just to introduce you to the idea that even the slightest thing could change everything. Yeah.
It's smart. No, I think you're absolutely right. They did their best to bring you along for their ride. And I think the nice thing about that is they are never really that far ahead of us. Like there's always at least one character that we can identify with. You never feel like both people have lost us in the story. We're always identifying with at least one of the characters, which is smart, which is really smart. The last thing you want is the audience to feel like you're advancing the story without them.
Yeah.
And so those little moments, clutch, got to have them. Yeah. And so it was at that point when, after the guy gets, into a coma, when Abe is like, okay, it's time to unveil the Big Daddy. And then he goes up and there's this little quick narration, right, where Abe prepared, for a really long journey. He basically had to sit in that box for 4 days to go back in time to before all this stuff started happening. And it feels like it takes place over the course of weeks, but it's only days because they keep reliving the same day. And so it takes a very long time for them to advance in time because one day is no longer a day. It's effectively, probably 36 hours, I think he says at one point. And it just takes a lot longer to go forward in time. And so Abe goes up there not knowing Aaron has already discovered his failsafe box that's been running since before he told Abe, or since before Abe told Aaron about it. And I think the naming convention should probably, get a comment. I think that's both, they're both A's. There's AA, AB. I think it's Shane Carruth's attempt at trying to inform us of who is actually first, going back, who's actually got the upper hand, who's actually got more knowledge. Because on the first track through the movie, you might think it's Abe because Abe is the one who's introducing time travel to Aaron. But once you get to the end of the story, you realize that Aaron, from our perspective, the viewer, Aaron was always there all along. And the key to it all is Abe. His last name is Turger, which you can, roll your eyes at this or not, but Turger is regret spelled backwards. And I think it's really appropriate when you factor in the way that the time machine works itself. The machine is sending them backwards through time. And this reminds me of the very first time I came across Neil deGrasse Tyson was probably around 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. He was doing one of those History Channel or National Geographic Channel shows, and he was talking about when he fell in love with science in the first place. He got obsessed with the idea of time travel because his father passed away, and he was like, I want to know if I can build a time machine to go back and save my dad or talk to my dad one more time. And he came up with the idea that the only way that could ever be possible is if you built a box and you started this box at whatever 10 o'clock in the morning. And now that box is effectively a tunnel that as long as it's operating, a year into the future, you could go back a year in time. You can walk into that box and you could go back a year in time by waiting for a year and then getting out of that box. And so I feel pretty sure that, Shane Carruth probably saw the same thing, was inspired by it, or maybe he's just his own fanatic and had thought of that same concept. Everyone has the same idea more than once, but it directly reminded me of that whole Neil deGrasse Tyson struggle with time travel.
No, I'm pretty sure it was his Amazon delivery boxes he just saw lying around in 2003. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I should do something with those Amazon delivery boxes. Oh, hey, let's make a movie. Just kidding. Didn't exist back then.
And so Turger spelled backward is regret, and it's kind of highlighting the idea that once we get to the end of the story, Abe is obviously very conflicted about everything that's happened. Like, he knows that there are multiple copies of Aaron out there. He doesn't know how many. He hopes there's only one extra copy of him out there, and that's that. But the thing that I love about the ending is we're listening to a phone call. It's not a voicemail. And so the guy that's making the phone call, that version of Aaron, is the same one that got overwhelmed by a very tired, time traveling Aaron. That he was like, that guy should have been more tired than me. He should have been more exhausted. I was fresh. I just woke up. I should have beat him. But what I didn't estimate properly was the passion and the drive that version of me had in him. And so we're listening to his point of view, the guy who gets kicked out of his own life. And now he's in France, I think, and he's building a new box, right? This whole warehouse of boxes. And it sets up this idea of what is he going to do? But it also, what I find really interesting, and I think is ultimately, whenever you really stop to consider this film, the heartbreaking part of it is Aaron didn't want his life. He had built a life for himself with a wife and a child, and he didn't value it. He didn't want it at all. And he was only too happy to escape it. And that, I think, is kind of the ultimate tragedy of the film, is this dude who just did not like the life that he had built for himself. And now money gave him an opportunity to build something else. And that's maybe kind of commenting on the garage engineer dream. Like, what are these guys really trying to build? Are they trying to build something to better humanity or just their own escape hatch? I don't know.
Interesting.
There's a lot. Because of how, messy and tangled the story is, I think there's a lot of things you could walk away from it and discuss. And that's kind of, a very satisfying aspect to the film. I don't know.
So one thing that I want to bring up, do you have more notes?
Yep.
No, perfect.
I'm out.
Perfect segue. One thing that I want to bring up that we've talked about before on the podcast a lot, and that I'm a big proponent of, I think you are too, is that in in indie filmmaking, and you know, shit, if you're the engineer in a garage, right? If you're the person building a studio in your backyard, if you're a you know, a whatever it is that you do, I think that it's important to remember, and even for
Shane Carruth.
even for Aaron,
Yeah.
no, I want to say Aaron. Aaron should have remembered that it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? It's the I'm going to love this thing I'm building in my backyard because I built it, right? Because I went through this process, this whole thing of learning about it, of doing it, executing it, and finishing it, right? It's the same thing with a film, and that's one of the things that I think. So Aaron didn't get it. Aaron didn't get that, and maybe even, you know, you could argue maybe Steve Jobs didn't necessarily get it, but actually I think Steve Jobs would get it. You know, does get it. It's the process of building something that was never built before, right? It's the everything from the ideation to the planning to the prep to the work, and then the completion. It's not the finished thing, because the finished thing is just a thing. And yes, it could make you a lot of money, it could change your life, and that's good. But I think that I really would argue that most people that make a lot of money doing something would say the happiest they were was in that garage building it in the first place, coming up with that creative, you know, having that creative outlet and having the
drive.
Well, yeah, and that moment of clarity of like, oh, that's it. I figured it out, right? You know, if I'm writing a song and I can't get a fucking line, and I'm like, God dang it, I just want to get that line. There it is. It's that moment that keeps me coming back to write more. It's, you know, that moment in the garage when this machine started working, right? It's like, oh, you're continually trying to chase that moment. And I think one of the things so Aaron didn't get that, but Shane Carruth did. Oh, so we need to extend this longer, and you can kind of see me say cut. Fuck it, putting it in. You know what I mean? Like it was the whole process of making it and just putting it out. Here you go, done. Here you go, world. And 17 years later, we're talking about this movie, and it's one of your favorites. And I mean, it's unbelievable in so many ways. I wouldn't call it my favorite, but I will say it is one of the most inspiring things that I've seen in a very long time. And it just makes me just want to create, man, just to do something and to remember that like we are lucky. We're so lucky that not only do we have the creative drive, but we have the ability, and we have the resources to do what it is that we want to do. You're doing it right now. You're writing a film right now. You made the decision this year. You said, I'm going to write a feature film, and you're doing it. And that's awesome. There shouldn't be any reason why you don't, right? And the thing is that once it's done, it's done. You just let it go. You put it out in the world and say, it's not mine anymore. You can have it, world. And then you go on to the next thing. And I did that wrong myself for so long. I would hold on to songs and to records that I would make and just be so proud of it, instead of I just took myself too seriously. I took my music too seriously and just let it go, and just be proud of it, and then move on and make something else. Right? Because you got more in you than just that album or just this movie or the last short that you made. You know, fuck it. Like, boom, there it is. Let it out. Gone. Okay, what's next? Let's do it. And I think that that's so inspiring that he did that. That all of these people in this film, they just did that. They're just like, let's make a movie. And it's $7,000. What can we do for $7,000? Oh, let's make a sci-fi film. Like, what? What the hell? Okay, how are we gonna do that? Well, we can do some tricks like this and that, and just be brilliant about it. Just be brilliant. So cool. So cool.
It's really amazing. I mean, that's such a good point in so many ways. Like, he didn't know how to. He would take a camera. He said, I think he took slide film to shoot what basically a storyboard of every shot that he wanted, and he effectively went and I forget who he talked to, but got some advice and says, how do I do this in video? Like, that was basically what he did. He's like, I know the shot that I want. I don't, what do I need to do? And so there's times whenever I'm pretty sure he's shooting tungsten balanced film in the daylight instead of daylight balanced film. And it changes the color wildly. But to your point, it was just like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's make a movie. And the amazing thing is it was celebrated not for its flaws, but for its ambition. That's incredible. Like,
wow.
I think you're absolutely right. There's nothing to lose. There's nothing. And that was, I think, for me, you know, hoping to make something that I took away from this. It was this attitude of, why not? This line. And I think as we're talking about it, I think to some degree this movie was a bit of a metaphor for itself, for its own creation, right? Because Shane Carruth took from his surroundings what was needed and made something more from it. And that's that's creation in and of itself. You know, it's finding it out, man, figuring it out, and just saying whatever, what will be. But at least I did it. Like, he made the bare minimum requirements for a movie in terms of runtime. I think 75 minutes is the minimum, and he's in at like 77. Absolute, like, I'm going to work it out, come what may. And it didn't matter. Like, I watched this for the first time in awe, not just because of the backstory. I don't even think I knew the backstory. I bought this right after watching the Spirit Awards. I literally went on Amazon and was like, it might have been my first Amazon purchase. I could probably go and look, but I just bought it, and I was like, whatever, just send it to me. And same copy that I still own. And I sat down and watched it with my brother. It was actually brutal. I was living in a house with 7 other dudes at the time, and
cool.
And they were all running around yelling as me and my brother are sitting on the couch trying to, you know, watch this movie with these low talking engineers. And we're like, I don't know what's happening. I don't either. I can't stop. Like, it's an amazing experience. And I was in absolute awe before I even found out, you know, all the backstory to the movie. I loved it still. And yeah, it's been really fun because I've watched it 3 times in the last 24 hours. And the first time,
God.
I was taking notes the first time, and I was like, I'm missing so much. And so I had to, you know, finish my notes, which were garbage, as you can all tell, and just sit and watch the movie and like enjoy it. Like, oh, that's right, that's what's happening. And then I watched it again right before, you know, we came on to do the episode, and I was like, oh, that's right. And the thing started finally clicking. It is still, with all its bumps and uglies, like, still a really impressive and fun film to just sit and watch. And what a genius.
I venture to say that it's better because of the flaws. I mean, can you imagine if you would have made a perfect movie for $7,000? That'd be a little boring.
Yeah.
I mean, this is much more interesting. You know why? Because it's freeing.
Yeah.
Because he took the rules and he didn't know them. And it's like Jimi Hendrix picking up a guitar. Oh, all I have is a right-handed guitar, but I'm left-handed, so I'm just going to play it anyway. And that's how he learned, right? You don't know the rules. You don't know you're not supposed to play that guitar that way. So you just, you know what I mean? So you just play. It's the same thing. He doesn't know the rules of filmmaking. He doesn't know the rules of tungsten balanced film. You know, like, whatever. We're just going to shoot. Oh, it looks pretty yellow. All right. Well,
So it goes.
that's what we got.
Because he bought
you know?
short ends. So with film stock, the big boys will shoot, 1,000 feet of film and only use 700 feet, and then basically sell it back on the cheap back to the labs, back to Kodak, or whoever really. Or maybe they just don't sell it back. They just send it in for development. The lab cuts off the extra 300 feet, and they sell that for cheap, and they call that a short end. And so he didn't buy entire fresh rolls. He shot on probably like 30 different short ends. And so the fun thing about film is each roll of film is a little specific and different from the next. Not usually by wide margins, but enough. And he bought those things up and was like, I'm gonna make a movie.
So, I mean, it leads to a question. Now, look, is it better? Like, if you know the difference and can make the decision to shoot tungsten balanced film inside rather than outside, you probably should do that, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
But it leads to the question of, if you're an indie filmmaker and you're trying to make something and all you've got is tungsten balanced film and you've got to use it to do an outside shot, do you say, fuck it, and just do it? Or do you say, oh, man, we're going to have to push a week so that I can save up some more money, or 2 weeks so I can save up more money to buy another short end or whatever? No, like, you just do it. Just do it. Like, one of my favorite guys that I follow a lot is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I feel like that guy just has, say what you will about the guy, and about either his past or, his political leanings or whatever, but he has done literally everything a human being can do in your life and been successful at all of it. And so he has like all of these great sayings and quotes that just are timeless, right? And that's one thing that he talks about. He says never have a plan B, because plan B stops plan A from happening, because you have plan B. So don't have a plan B. You just go do it. And whatever it is that you got to do to get it done, you get it done. I mean, like, I don't know what Shane Carruth has done since, but the point isn't that, it gave him a big film career. The point is that he made this thing that, like, now 17 years later, you and I are talking about. How cool is that, man? Now, if he would have waited 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there to get the right film, would we still be sitting here talking about it? I don't know. Created a new alternate universe. Who knows? But I think the point is that, I guess my question is, because we know the difference, you in particular, the difference. Where is the line to say, no, you know what, I want to follow that rule, or I don't want to follow the rule. We're just going to go, because there probably is a line. Like, he didn't have a line because he didn't know any rules, and that's fine. You can play ignorance when you are ignorant, but when you're not ignorant, where is the line? Do you know what do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where is the line to actually ask that question of, should I follow that rule, or should I just go and make this, the best I can with what I have? Like, I don't know.
That's such a good question. And I feel like it's a very Jaws kind of question, and it's the quintessential filmmaker question, because I've been really lucky with all my productions. I've never had a really big issue. Like, I've never rained out a shot or whatever, lost a camera lens or anything like that. Or whatever, my actor got sick and couldn't come in today. Now I got to shoot this scene with what I got, or whatever. I've been super, super fortunate. But not everyone has. And you can look at whether it's Star Wars or Jaws, and we'll be tackling those in the coming weeks. But where do you draw that line? And I think it comes down to, to quote a very genius guy, both. Maybe it's both. Like, yeah. I think you work it on the day. You're like, you know what? We're here. We're gonna grab it. We're gonna make it work. And if it doesn't work, then you can still come back. I like your man. I think that's such a good point. Plan B will stall plan A. Maybe not every time, but too many times. You don't want to know. You don't want to find out when it did.
Right. Right.
Just get it. And I think that's
I think the bigger plan A is, the more important it is to not have a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that means. It's like, it's not like, hey, I'm going to go to the store, and if they don't have whole milk, I'm going to get 2%. Well, I mean, plan B, 2%, like, who gives a shit about that? Like, that doesn't, it doesn't matter. But if it's like, I'm going to be a big filmmaker, or if not, I'm going to have this job on the side just in case to make some extra money.
So there's a famous Ridley Scott scene where a thing bursts out of another guy's a character's chest. And I was listening to an interview with Ridley Scott, with the LA Times film critic, and they were just kind of going through his career, and they talked about specifically, one film. And Ridley Scott was saying, man, you know what? We only had that rig to go once. Once that was done, it was done. And we called action, started rolling, and the effect wasn't working. We were trying to punch through this guy's chest. It's not his literal chest, but the makeup. And the actors hadn't seen the scene, so they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. They knew, story-wise what was going to happen, but they didn't know the effect. And so the effect wasn't working, and Scott was like, cut. Like he cut right there in the moment. He's like, this isn't work. And this was the kind of scene where it was just like, once we go, we go. And he made sure everyone was aware. They're rolling 3-4 cameras. And he's like, once we go, we go. And now he's calling cut, like trying to not ruin the shot and also just make it work. It. And so he went in and he scored the shirt a little bit to help the effect. And he's like, I don't know if this is going to work. And, his DP's looking at him like, what the hell are we about to do? He's like, so let's see what happens. Roll action again. And, the thing bursts and blood sprays everywhere. Because here was the thing. He's like, I knew once the scene happened, we weren't going to be able to clean up the set and do another take. Blood was going to be everywhere. It was going to be everywhere. And so we really needed to get it this first time around. And of course, like you said, man, there was no plan B. It was like, we go. And
That's it.
It's, cinema history, obviously. But I think you're right, man. I think there is a lot to be said, and obviously build contingencies where you can, but, don't spend all your time fretting, I think is the lesson for me, I'll say. And to make the most of what you can. And I feel like that's all we've done in all of our projects, right? Whether we were shooting ridiculous, music videos in the woods or, 3 music videos in a weekend, or Kona videos, like your Iron Man video, still one of my favorite things. We just, hey, here's what we got. Let's just play with it. Like, have an idea. And I think that's one of my strongest suits. I don't know if this would work whenever I go in to make a film, but I'm pretty loose with I have a very specific shot list, and at the same time, I keep it loose for magic on set. I know here's the kind of shot that I want. Here's the tools that I'm going to need to execute it. But I'm not a big believer in storyboards. Like, I don't want to see a storyboard. I want to walk into the set without some preconceived specific notion of what a frame is going to look like. I know what I want in the shot in my head. And so kind of like the show, man, I go over my shot list a lot and before I walk on set. And, I'm reading the script, I'm looking through my shot list, and I'm saying, I'm putting those puzzle pieces together in my head, because even though I can't remember someone's face, I can't close my eyes and say, here's what Todd looks like at all. Like, you're just a fucking mannequin in my mind. But I can close my eyes and I can see edits very crystal clear in my head. I can see what one shot is going to do to the next shot. And whenever I see in my head, whenever I've connected those two shots with my camera, I can move on and feel very, very good until the end of the day when we wrap and you look at me and you say, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't think we got it.
Yeah. Always. Always. I'm like,
Always
okay, it was
out.
a good day. It was a good day. Yeah.
But
that's awesome, man.
So much, man. Primer, Shane Carruth, thank you. I'd love to have him on someday and talk about it. And to answer your non-question, he made Upstream Color after this. And I actually got to audition for it. Cool. I drove to Dallas and I was having a really bad week that week. I was not getting sleep. And like at all, I was getting maybe 2 hours of sleep a night for whatever. I just chronic insomnia throughout my life. And I knew I had this audition coming up and that's not what kept me up, but I knew that if I didn't, once I went to sleep, I needed to stay asleep. And so I operated, this is at our old job, Demand Media. I operated that on my own, basically. I kind of ran my own department more or less. And no one ever came looking for me. No one ever gave a crap what I was doing until the day of this audition. I had committed. I turned off my phone, turned off my alarms. I was like, I don't care what time I fall asleep. Once I fall asleep, I'm staying asleep. Blacked out my windows. Because I hadn't slept all week and I was just really starting to, wear myself out. Like I was very short, my brain was scattered. It was just very frustrating and it was starting to drive me a little insane, to be honest. And so I just committed. And whenever I finally woke up, I went to sleep, stayed asleep for a good, I think I got 6 or 7 hours that night, which was enough for me at the time. And I wake up and like my phone had been blowing up. My boss, who was like one step below the CEO in this $1 billion company, is trying to call me, and I'm getting emails from one of my coworkers in LA, Yuri, and he's like, "Hey, where are you? Steven's freaking out." And I'm like, "Y'all guys never call or email me. Yeah. This is the day." And so I apologize, and I felt horrible. And I don't even think it was a big deal that what they were needing. They were just, I think, a little worried about me because I'm also a very on person. Like if you reach out to me, it's pretty common. I'll respond within, minutes. And for me to not respond probably worried them a little bit, but I was like, "Hey, yeah, sorry guys. I haven't slept at all this week, blah, blah, blah." And they were like, "Oh crap. Okay. Well, thanks. Just let us know, which is reasonable." And I was like, "Yeah, and here's what I got going on today. I'm auditioning." And so it was fun. I got to audition for, Shane Carruth, which was to this day still my favorite audition, or at least my, most exciting audition. I don't usually get to audition for, feature films of someone that I'm absolutely obsessed with. So
I know, right?
Yeah. So it was like, you would have had to have said, okay, you can audition for Shane Carruth and then maybe Christopher Nolan. And that would have had to have been the only next level of like excitement. Beyond that.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
At that time. Yeah. So big deal to me.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, that's my random.
That's cool.
Thing. It was for one of the leads in the film.
Well, if Shane, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show.
Yeah. I'll see if I can reach out. I think our buddy Ryan knows him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
That would be really cool. And he can come educate us on everything that's happened. I know he had a film that I was excited about called Topiary. A topiary that was, in the works and couldn't get funding. So it's crazy, even though at this point in the industry, he is Shane Carruth. Like that's a name if you're in the industry that and he still has problems getting funding. So I'd love to hear about his experiences there and obviously making Primer and whatever else he would want to talk about. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd love that. Dang.
So
what are we doing next week?
So next week, I thought we could do Lady Bird, which
it's
to
great.
me is Greta Gerwig's. I think she did a movie. She co-directed a movie before this, but to me, that's her debut film. So I want to look at Lady Bird and see, what can we take away as a budding director can learn from that. So yeah, we'll take a look at Lady Bird with Timothée Chalamet and Saoirse Ronan. And yeah, so stay tuned for that. What are you going to recommend this week?
This week I'm gonna recommend another indie film that's a little older, and will also melt your brain a little bit.
Ooh.
Because why not? That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna recommend Donnie Darko from 2001. It has a very young Jake Gyllenhaal in it, and I think Jenna Maloney, whatever. Anyway, she's great in it too. It's very interesting film. I don't know how to explain anything in it, so just go watch it.
Yeah, you want another mind bender? That's a great recommendation. Richard Kelly is also from Austin, and as is Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I think his sister is even in it, Maggie Gyllenhaal. And
oh yeah, right. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's absolutely incredible. I mean, they're both wildly talented.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude, yeah, and it's funny, man. I was actually, was it today or yesterday? I was looking up stills of Donnie Darko.
What?
It's so random.
That's crazy.
I was looking for one of our faux sponsors, and I was like, oh, I could make it the movie theater that they went to the and Donnie Darko, and I thought it would be perfect for this episode. And so I couldn't quite make it out from the frame, and so I just skipped it. Anyway,
that's cool.
That's pretty cool synchronicity there. Nice. I kind of struggle with this one. I don't know how to piggyback. I mean, you beat me this week for sure.
Out Waterburgered you.
I'm going to recommend another micro budget film called Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
I think if you've never seen it, I know you to some degree need to appreciate, scary films. I think for whatever, it's $15,000 budget or whatever it is, they did an absolutely incredible job. It's one of the most effective horror films like I've seen. It will just get to you. It's very patient storytelling. It's some very smart effects. And for nickels, like it's just incredibly cheaply made, but with a lot of expertise of the same style, I feel like, that you see in Shane Carruth, like just very intelligent and witty filmmaking. So
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. I don't know if I out Waterburgered you, man. That's a really good suggestion.
Thanks, man.
I like it.
It's no Donnie Darko, but
you're right. You're right.
Nice.
Double meat, double cheese, bacon.
So don't forget
lettuce, tomato, and mustard and onion.
Grill those
onion rings with fries. Out Waterburgered.
Don't forget to subscribe, review us on iTunes or wherever you listen to the show. Those things really do help. We would really, really appreciate it. I haven't seen a new review pop up since Charlie, and so I check it every once in a while.
Okay.
So anybody who wants to drop a review, I will, I don't know, give you a shout out.
Like something, yeah, and like something you think that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Maybe something you think we would hate. Ooh, that would be interesting.
But you got to do it in a review. You got to leave us a review.
Yeah, exactly.
For the recommendation. You can't have us watching, The Room Part 2 without like.
Oh my gosh. That's please never.
I traditionally when we do intentionally bad films, I traditionally I've gotten drunk and I've gotten high. If we had to do like The Room Part 2, The Roomier, I would probably have to shoot heroin. It would just get bad.
Oh man. Wow. Please don't suggest.
Yeah.
Don't make it, and then don't suggest we watch it.
But if you want to leave a comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/primer.
And our quote of the day is from the Wright Brothers. If we worked on the assumption that what is accepted as true really is true, then there would be little hope for advancement. I mean, that is the quintessential mindset of anybody who's done anything great. The Wright Brothers are perfect. They're it's the perfect people to make this kind of quote. you know, a Steve Jobs, a Bill Gates, like these people that have changed the world when other people said you can't do that. You can't go up against IBM. You know, you can't, like it. The word can't is hilarious. I've always thought it was funny. And anytime my kids say, when I say put on your shoes, I can't, my feet hurt, don't say that word. I don't even like that word in my house because that limits you. You can do anything. And especially when someone says you can't do something, of course you can. And you should do it in their face. Like right up, you know, like show them how wrong they are while you're doing the thing they said you can't do. I mean, unless you're going to hurt somebody, you don't want to do that. You know what I mean? But
I'll go get my shotgun.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Wow. But no, that's a great quote. That's really inspiring. Good
Full
job.
stop, man. I have nothing to add. Well said.
Oh, cool. Well, I Whataburgered you again. Here we go. Just kidding. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. A great quote to end on, man. Great job selecting that. Make sure to subscribe, review us on iTunes, share us with your friends, tell us what you want us to do, and maybe we'll do it. Maybe we won't, but you know, if you review us, we'll probably do it. So join us next week. We'll be doing Lady Bird. Make sure to watch that before the episode. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.